Not everyone's voice needs to be heard. Most people are stupid. This is even more prevalent on social media, which breeds an unhealthy, toxic, self-absorbed environment. Most of these voices that want to be heard should not be, so they aren't allowed to spread their hatred or biased opinions. I also don't care what athletes or celebrities think, nor should they use their platform to lecture me when they can't and won't ever relate to the average Joe. I miss the days before social networks where information was slower to develop, which was able to be more trustworthy and accurately portrayed than Mr. Keyboard Warrior's opinion on what happened and why I should be outraged. Most of Reddit voice doesn't need to be heard. Twitter is the worst place to listen to opinions. The worst part about social media is that now everyone has a voice. I agree with you up until the last point. Here in the UK there were racist criminal gangs that were sexually abusing and trafficking children in massive numbers, and the local governments and in some locations even the police forces were 100% complicit in helping and enabling them to operate. The only reason the stories broke was because of the huge volume of evidence and the messages being passed around on social media. Until then, every major media outlet had remained silent to avoid causing unrest. The media isn't our friend and needs to be held to account as much as any business or politician. Opinions are like assholes, everyone got on but they think each other's stink. As much as I agree that the voice of the majority is often irrelevant, I have to point out a few things. 1. Who is to judge whose voice should/shouldn't be heard? You. What if I tell you that I don't think you're smart enough to make that decision? My point is that it's a slippery slope, and when it comes to opinions it's all subjective, so you can't just quantify that and put it on a graph. 2. Nobody is infallible and nobody's perfect. You might think someone's opinion is irrelevant, but it might turn out that it's actually relevant and that it's your opinion that's irrelevant, but you wouldn't know that unless someone tells you, and even if someone does, most people just double down. 3. If you have a problem with some people voicing their opinions, just block them or don't use social media. I only use Facebook for its chat feature. I don't even bother looking at the feed these days because it's not something I'm interested in. 4. In the good old days information wasn't more reliable, if anything it was less reliable because you had fewer sources. If those sources were corrupt and made up fake info, you'd have absolutely no way of verifying that because there would be no other sources. Just look at Fox News as a good example of this. During the good old days people took their word for it and assumed Fox News was a reliable source because there was no other point of reference, because news stations don't rat on each other. But these days, due to people's opinions and experiences being heard, as well as a lot of said experience being documented on social media, Fox News has been exposed to be consistently airing false/biased information. Now most of the people who still take Fox News' word are actually the older generation that doesn't have the habit of fact-checking the news they hear, whereas a lot of the younger generation knows better. Now if the media say something, you can Google it, look up what people say online, and you'd have a huge pool of info to look through and come to your own conclusions. Is it much more work? Yeah, but it's better that way. Then don't listen to them. The problem isn't with their voices being said, as stupid people existed way back when humanity was conceived. The problem is mainly with people forgetting that you shouldn't be listening to everything you hear. Yes. Social media has resulted in the degradation of our public discourse. Until then, the opinion pundits and news aggregators had to preserve their credibility. They may have leaned right or leaned left, but they had reputations to protect and thus didn't say ridiculous things. Now you've got fake profiles and randoms who say shit and people believe it. I mean, do you think any reputable news service would hire the intellectually vacuous Tomi Lahren to present opinion? But you can follow her on Twitter and hear everything the airhead has to say. People have a right to speak, but the rest of us also have a right to ignore them. What are these voices saying that you disagree with, and are you one of the voices that shouldn't be heard? Knowing this I can already guess the answer to post question. So I guess your voice doesn't need to be heard. Op's voice doesn't need to be heard. I think everyone should just shut up. I disagree. The disabled community, for example, used to be pretty much silent because many are unable to leave their house or attend protests, which are often inaccessible, which used to mean they just couldn't get their voices heard at all. Now though, through the internet they can be heard, usually have unique and valid perspectives on things and are often sound, level-headed people. I'm not sure this is unpopular. Most of the internet believes only their opinion is of sufficient quality to be heard. I am very smart. Nobody's voice should be silenced, but not everyone's voice should be respected. Every side thinks the other side is stupid. You're basically asking never to hear dissenting views. Question. Celebrities' opinions can easily be lacking in expert support and reasoning, but they have a significant audience that will listen to them and not an expert they've never heard of. If by using this unique position they better the lot of humanity, does this justify their speaking voice? I agree if you also say you're yourself okay with not being heard. That's a very pig-headed thing to say. You kinda say everyone's dumb to make your opinion superior. It would make you look smarter if you could verbally convince people of your opinion and views. That way you don't come off as an asshole too. But I agree, some people are just all over with their opinions. But who are we to define which opinions are good or bad? As long as the lowest number of people possible get hurt, I guess. You don't care about their opinions and experiences because it doesn't match your own narrative. Some of these athletes were average Joes from poor households and know the struggle. Celebrities are also human beings who have thoughts and opinions. Why do you feel the need to filter to only what is comfortable to you? You give a sheep a microphone, other sheep will follow. I think the problem here is that we have no way to differentiate whose opinion is valuable or not other than the upvote/downvote mechanism. So you're forced to put it out there and see how people respond. If people are forced to make a self-assessment as to whether or not their thoughts should be heard, they will almost always place themselves into the should be heard category.